Since I began this series 3 years ago, I covered several fictional mothers. For this entry, I'm bringing the theme back, though this time I'm looking at a character that is quite the departure from them in very many ways. Don Bluth's Secret of Nimh, which stands for the National Institute of Mental Health, is a 1982 American animated dark fantasy film based on the 1970 book Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nimh by Robert C. O'Brien. Our protagonist is a widowed field mouse named Mrs. Brisby, who is desperate to find a cure for her bedridden son Timothy at the worst possible time, when all the animals must relocate due to the farmer's plow. What starts as this personal journey for a mother frightened out of her wits by every obstacle becomes almost like a pilgrimage that determines the fate of everyone around her. By this point, we've seen various middle-aged single mothers leading their own stories. However, it's still so rare for them to have more than 1 or 2 children, especially in animation, though this is only one aspect that makes Nimh incredibly unique. Considering that adult animated films and series have always existed, there is a certain maturity and groundedness that separates the likes of Nimh from the crass, problematic movies that tend to pervade the market. It's really not that often that a child on the brink of death will create the stakes for a conflict no matter where you look. And this is one of those instances where we must acknowledge the difference between family-oriented media and programming strictly intended for children. With Bluth and countless other storytellers who chose to move away from the Disney method, keen on exploring alternative approaches to conveying relatable or powerful messages for families, crossover appeal was inevitable. Now, I personally believe that, unless we've experienced it ourselves some way, we wouldn't fully understand and appreciate a character like Brisby until we've lived out more of our own lives and gotten to know people in similar circumstances. I'm willing to bet plenty of us expect mothers of 4, particularly in the case of young children, to have their contributions mostly revolve around the household. We do indeed see her patience, sacrifice, work ethic, responsibility, understanding, benevolence, and affection. But the home isn't the only place she demonstrates these qualities, and I'm sure real-life parents will tell you the same thing about themselves if you aren't already one yourself. The problem these days with consuming Hollywood and westernized content at large is that we internalize very restrictive, unsophisticated standards for what character mapping and characterization ought to look like. It wouldn't surprise me if modern audiences dismissed heroines like Brisby for being demure with a youthful charm, ladylike, and requiring assistance from others. Yet, we all have loved ones like this, right? Including those who take up homemaking duties, and we certainly don't judge them for making that choice. That being said, let's go back to my previous statement. Brisby isn't a strictly domestic creature, nor is she entirely traditional. Her plight seems impossible at first, given that small mice are typically observed as being, well, kind of hopeless compared to larger animals. Still, if she is to succeed in saving Timothy and ensuring her family is able to move their home, she has to overcome many adversities she never thought she would, like flying with her companion Jeremy and meeting the great owl, who, although looks terrifying and probably would have eaten her in any other circumstance, is willing to help her and by extension other creatures his kind normally hunts too. Taking risks like this can mean seeing the world in ways previously deemed impossible, leading to her building the unlikeliest of friendships. Despite her feats, however, Brisby isn't brave at all. In fact, she never gets over her fears. But being scared is not a sign of cowardice. Rather, it exhibits care and desperation to set things to rights, which is why she elects to work with her shortcomings instead. We also have to remember what her adventure means for her and her family. Not only could she die at any moment, but she also has to be away from her children for most of the film. It doesn't matter that they're being looked after. Their safety could very well be compromised, whether by the farmers plowing or predators in the meantime. That would make her quite determined. Certainly, you'd need to be completely resolute to press forward, knowing what the ultimate price is. The reality is, most of us wouldn't be prepared to face danger or some form of hardship because we aren't conditioned to do so. We nonetheless have to believe in our inner wit and resourcefulness to persevere as opposed to worrying about being good enough. I hope that Brisby and other characters and people like her can teach us to rewire our mindset. Although there are several interesting characters, whether by design or personality, Brisby very much steals the show. As she should, she's the star, and her protagonism isn't overshadowed by anyone else. Sure, she may not have the most groundbreaking personality or values, but the way that she subverts expectations does make her a standout that has pleasantly surprised children and adults alike. She's not exceptionally intelligent, and her late husband Jonathan was the one who taught her to read. Yet, she gets to decide how she uses the skill and the enlightenment that comes from it. Brisby proves how bold and shrewd she can genuinely be when she ceases to follow specific instructions. She dares to drug Dragon, the farmer's nightmarish cat, keeping in mind that he killed Jonathan and poses another threat to them all. She spares the captured rats by warning them about the Nimh agents, putting an end to consequential experiments and mistreatment. These were the actions that allowed the amulet, her inheritance, to see her pure heart and help her move her family's house. On a minor note, we do see Brisby being charmed by Justin, a worthy leader for the rats who protects her from harm and participates in the move, albeit never remarrying. He later becomes a fatherly figure to Timothy, who becomes a protagonist in the 1998 sequel. It makes me think that he could be a great match for Brisby in the future. She simply might not be ready yet. Which brings me to what is perhaps her most admirable trait. No matter how many new alliances she forms, accomplishments she has, and discoveries she unearths, she still puts Timothy's health and the well-being of her children above everything else. She may have her limits, frustrations, and doubts, but none of that changes who she is at her core, a most delightful lady seeking peace for her loved ones. I came to a realization after witnessing the brief cameo she has in the sequel. She's the epitome of the unsung hero, still being so modest after all that transpired, and she doesn't like to make a spectacle of herself. I'm convinced she remains focused on getting justice and doing good by her loved ones because they deserve it, not because she wants to be seen as their savior or hold her heroism over anyone's head. Surely she knew she couldn't be too self-centered if she were to accomplish what she did in the original film, and in turn, she allowed others to care for her. My wish is for today's youth to understand how special Brisby really is and the mark she's made on cinema, along with so many others we've talked and have yet to talk about on this channel. I still want to believe that more of us, whether we're mothers or not, can sympathize and connect with characters who we, in truth, interact with every day.